Connecticut, and since then I've lived kind of all over the place. But early artistic experiences, I took art classes in this little. It was above a dollhouse shop. I remember going there as a kid, and we had the teacher had this file of all different kinds of images, and we were working from found images, and he also had a setup of still life in the center of the room, and so that was probably my earliest, artistic training outside of school, and I continued doing art programs, after school and in the summertime through high school. My parents have always been very supportive of me in terms of my pursuit of my interest in art, and I did my undergrad at Hampshire College in Western Massachusetts and studied both fine art and writing there, creative writing. And I did my graduate work at the University of Illinois in Chicago. It really was in graduate school that I feel like I started to kind of find myself as an artist and sort of build both my skill level and my greater sense of, what kind of work is my work. So. I was in Chicago for 6 years, and I studied with Carrie James Marshall, who is probably the single most influential person in terms of my artistic development. Just an incredibly generous, teacher. And I then did a number of artist in residence programs. I moved to Houston, Texas, where I did the core program at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. And I did the Studio Museum in Harlem, residency in New York, and then I was an artist in residence at Mequitta here in Baltimore. So probably the largest, source that I draw from in terms of my imagery is Indian painting, Indian miniature painting. I have an interest in building large imagery out of small marks and building this kind of surface where there's so much visual activity on every element of the page, and that idea really comes from looking at Indian miniature painting in terms of the kind of detail and patterning that creates a sense of a sort of all over pattern and design, and also with my works on canvas, I think about oil painting and building the surface through small marks, so the surface becomes kind of richly textured. And also the figures in my work, often the posture or the sense of the figure having a kind of agency or power in the space, that also comes from the kind of goddess imagery that I've seen in Hindu painting especially. Most of my ideas come from being in the studio and working, so I'll work on something and it'll propose other possibilities, kind of, well, what if I had done this, or a composition was this, or what if the figure was this? So typically my ideas kind of come from working. I make preliminary sketches kind of two types. So some are very, just sort of sketching out ideas. And then some are much more involved, where I'll work out composition and color ideas. But they still tend to change quite a lot, moving from that preliminary stage to a larger scale work on paper or work on canvas. So for the works on paper, I start by building my page. So I start with a kind of, it's a almost semi-transparent paper that I collage together, and before I even start to kind of build the page, I start by marking and stamping the paper, so giving this kind of history to the paper. I use a variety of mark making tools, Indian printing blocks, old letterpress type, corrugated cardboard, pretty much anything I can get a mark from. So then I rip the papers apart, collage them together, and then draw on it, so that I have to reconcile the imagery that I've prepared with this surface that already has this rich texture and a color going on, and it's through that kind of back and forth that the visual dynamics of the work start to happen.